Welcome back to another episode of Work in Programming. This week, I'm joined by Landy Simpson. Landy, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Would you mind giving like a quick introduction of like how you got into programming and like what you're doing now?
So I got into programming from the early days of like Neopets and MySpace. That's how I first jumped into the game. And I didn't know what programming was called at that time. I just knew it was like HTML and CSS. And eventually that led me to my university degree of computer science. I studied computer science at the University of Toronto, St. George campus. So, 6 years in school, you do like a year of internship, you eventually kind of get a grasp of what industry is really about. And eventually I found myself here at a consultation company downtown. Yeah, and it's been a roller coaster. Like I've been learning so much more than I ever thought I would. It's been about 4 years now since I graduated. So 4 years at a, small to medium startups, like it might not seem like a lot, but you can learn so much from these startups just because of like how fast paced it is.
And especially since like you work across different tech stacks and you kind of like worked across different platforms.
Yeah, there's just so much you could take away, which is what I really like about startup culture. But yeah, and I guess it's these kind of experiences with startup culture that kind of eventually led me to writing about a lot of the topics that I do on Medium. Because it's just like you learn so much in one day, or you learn so much under one project. One day it's useful, the next day it's not. Like how do you retain that knowledge? How do you make sure that you have something to work with the next time you revisit this tech stack,
Totally. And is that like you started writing to kind of solve that problem?
Yeah, like I'm not so great with like remembering things. Like I will do such a great job in the moment, and then if you ask me like 6 months later, I'll be like, I have no idea how I did that. So I initially started writing as a way to kind of help me remember the things that I was learning and really solidify that knowledge to myself. But I also realized there was like a need for this kind of thing, like a need for beginner explanations of certain things, like a need for that kind of content in our industry. So I realized, I'm helping a lot of people if I just continue to write, like if I continue to write under this perspective. So yeah, that's really what got me writing.
So what's your process for that then? Are you like, you solve a problem at work and you just kind of like start writing out the solution that you wish you could have found on Google? Or I know you do like Elasticsearch. I've seen a few like intro articles about that and like stuff like that. So I'm curious, like, how do you?
So usually when I encounter a problem, I write down what that problem was like from the start. Like I try to do my best to be diligent throughout the process of solving an error or solving a problem, write down every step that I took to solve that problem, because through those kind of barriers or through issues, you can find great ways of like solidifying your knowledge and really understanding a particular tool or language just by going down that rabbit hole, right? So my first step, write down the error. And then as I'm solving the error along the way, I'm taking notes. I'm trying to like understand, why did I encounter this? Or like, why is something a certain way? And I try to write it down in a way that's understandable for me. Like if I'm going to look back on these notes 10 years in the future, I have to be able to understand it, right? Like I can't be using jargon that I might not remember what it means. Like I have to write it down in a manner that anybody who reads these notes can clearly understand. And then from notes, I move on to the actual like writing process.
What are your favorite parts about the job as like a software developer in general, and what are your like least favorite parts?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think my least favorite parts is getting the requirements that you need to do the job. I've been at a couple of companies now, and when it comes to speccing out a product, nobody ever knows exactly what they want. Like they can tell you exactly how they vision the product, but in terms of like functionality or the way that it's supposed to look or the way that it, like the kind of community that you want to target, that's where most people get lost. And to extract that information as a developer, it's tedious. It's confusing. Like sometimes the client doesn't communicate clearly about like what exactly they want. Sometimes they're kind of vague on it. And then you have to make some assumptions, in which you never really want to make assumptions, but sometimes you're kind of put in that position. So yeah, that's my least favorite part, kind of doing that back and forth. But my favorite part is usually when I reach the end of a project and I look back at the code base and I'm like, wow, this thing grew a lot. And then I see the product that comes out of it. That's pretty much my favorite part. Just seeing the end result of like all the months of work that I've put into something. It just feels really fulfilling and rewarding.
Totally. Yeah. And then I guess like the cool thing is like once you can see people like actually using something,
Yeah.
and you kind of just like it's just it's different, right? Because like when you're developing it, you know, you're working in your like perfect environment,
Yeah.
things like make sense. You kind of like you will understand it in a certain way, and then like people will use it differently than you initially intended.
Yeah, no, that's actually, that could be both a good thing and a bad thing. Like
Yeah.
on one hand, you're like, wow, I never thought of using my product like that or using this software like that. Like I built it for this specific way, but I guess you can interpret it that way too. And it ends up either helping a lot of people, or sometimes your users end up finding all the bugs that you could never find, no matter how hard you hunted for them. You just weren't thinking in that way. So
Totally.
it's an interesting process being in this field.
I know that you gave a talk recently, and I'm curious about like maybe you could quickly describe like what the talk was about, and then like we can kind of, I'm interested to hear how that opportunity came about, and like how you prepared for it, how you felt throughout the whole thing.
Okay, so the conference was hosted by Power to Fly. So it's a company that's focused on empowering women to seek opportunities in an assortment of different careers, and like being able to mentor them and guide them through that process. So my presentation was a technical presentation. It was like an introduction to Elasticsearch and how you could use it to optimize search functionalities. And it was for like their, what's it called again? I guess it was like their introductory summit for the year, their diversity summit. And it was very interesting because I wasn't sure what kind of presentation to give and in what context to give it. Like, it's a diversity conference. Like, should I talk about something that's diversity related? Should I talk about my experiences? And doing a little bit of back and forth with the event coordinator, like eventually I found out like a lot of these people who are attending and are tuning into this technical portion, they want feasible skills. They want skills that they could use and learn and take away from and think about. So I was just like, okay, like, I guess Elasticsearch would be kind of a cool tool to use, especially since, you know, in the past year, we've noticed how much search engines have impacted our lives. Like, people were searching, why do Black Lives Matter? And why does, you know, democracy matter? And like the amount of questions about what was happening in our world, like what is COVID? You know, people were turning to Google for answers when they couldn't find answers anywhere else. So I was just like, you know what, it's a nice way to kind of frame why optimizing search engine matters, because people are looking for answers. People want answers, and you can't build an application with, you know, kind of like a suboptimal search functionality. Nobody's going to want to use your product. So
right, yeah, like you don't, yeah, no one wants to, like, you have to like type out the exact title or like the spacing or whatever.
Like, nobody wants to do that.
Yeah,
it's difficult. So what actually led to that opportunity was one of the articles that I wrote for my 30-day event challenge in December. So one night I randomly thought of like, oh, okay, let me just try a 30-day challenge. Let's see if I could be consistent for 30 days. And I think it was about my 7th day, I posted the beginner's guide to Elasticsearch. And it took me all day to write. Like, it was so difficult for some reason. Like, I couldn't compose my thoughts properly for the day.
Yeah.
And I kind of let it out there. I was like, well, it is what it is. Like, I tried my best, and I went to sleep. And the next morning I was shocked to see like it had like 5,000 views.
Oh, wow.
Overnight. I was like, how did that happen? Like, what happened? And it was being shared on Twitter. And then eventually like Elasticsearch developers started reaching out to me, and it really took off in a way that I didn't think it would.
Yeah.
And eventually people on LinkedIn started messaging me, and one of the co-founders of Power to Fly found that article and reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to do a conference.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was just like, I have no idea. Why would you ask me to be in a conference? Like, I'm not anyone special. I'm just, some intermediate software developer at a small company. Who's going to hire or look at me as like conference worthy,
That's so cool. I love that. How did you feel like, I'm assuming that this is like, and like it was just like a huge, like that sounds like a viral hit, Medium is like, normally you get like a few, views here and there.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't take off, it doesn't take off, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is like a big deal. Although I know that you've written quite a few like really hard hitting articles, but was this like a huge exception? Like, how did you feel? Like, how excited were you?
This was the biggest exception. Like I've written good content before that, it had its moment, and I was just like, 100 views or 500 views, like that's cool. But I've never surpassed anything more than maybe 700 during my time on Medium. So when I woke up to see this, I was really confused, and I was super excited because I was just like, well, what's next? Like how far can I actually fly with this? And it was, to my surprise, like it helped me a lot. Like it took me off to new heights that I never imagined. But it was definitely one of those opportunities that I don't know if I'll ever hit 5,000 again overnight, but it was a great starting point, especially for like the 7th day of my writing challenge. Like that was a great place to start.
Totally. And it just proves that like what you were trying to do was a great idea, apparently, like obviously. How did you end up doing with the rest of the challenge?
So the rest of the challenge was hard. By the 10th day, I was exhausted. I was like, wow, coming up with content is so difficult. Like, everything that you do, every movement that you make, every thought that you think of has to be considered content, right? Like you have to write it down and be like, is this content worthy? Is this something that my, readers would find interesting? You have to start questioning every aspect of your life. And it became very tiresome, like I was constantly self-reflecting, constantly reading. And as much as I enjoyed, learning so much about myself and the rest of the world around me, pumping out content and publishing that same day would not recommend. Would not. So yeah, it was very difficult. But like I got through the 30 days and I felt very proud of myself. It just showed like you can be consistent if you put your mind to it.
Totally. I can't imagine, like I've written, let's see, 5, maybe like 6 articles in like, I've been planning to do it like weekly. I can't imagine, like each of those articles took me like weeks, to just like think through and like constantly push back. So I commend you. That's amazing. Like,
no, it's really, really tough. Like when I think about it, some of the articles that I wrote in the day, I was like, wow, this could have been even better if I took like an extra week to kind of think about it. Or, I marinated it on it for about like a day or so. Like these could be really amazing articles, but it's the fact that I got an idea out in the day that really shocked me. I was just like, sometimes when you think you're like, you have a writer's block, you actually don't. The thing is, you're just not trying hard enough. You're not thinking hard enough, or you're not inquiring about certain aspects of your life hard enough to really see like there's value in what you think, there's value in what you read and what you're experiencing, and people can relate to that.
Yeah. And I like that, like a lot of your articles are like pretty vulnerable. Like they make you feel something. Like the article that you wrote about, I think you did one on imposter syndrome, and then you did one on burnout. I know the burnout one at least.
Burnout.
Really amazing. Like, because it's exactly how everyone's feeling like during this right now, right? But the way you wrote it is just like, it's like, it's you.
And the thing is, like when I wrote that article, I was at my peak burnout. Like I was so exhausted. I hadn't written for like weeks. I feel like it was months. And I just I didn't have the energy to get out of bed most of the days. And I was just like, wow, this feeling, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Like I've talked to friends that have felt the same way. My parents feel the same way. Like everybody's feeling the same way. So what are we going to do about it? How do we talk about this? And I think it's really important to talk about burnout and mental health and self-care because during this time, we're all very vulnerable, like mentally and physically. So what are we going to do to make sure that we can still communicate like, hey, I'm tired, like being okay with saying, hey, I'm tired, I'm taking a break, or hey, I'm just not in the mood to deal with this situation right now. So we have to open up those conversations, especially times like now.
Totally. Yeah. Like I feel like right now, especially when you're remote, and if you're like, I mean, I feel like most developers kind of fit into that area where you're like, I don't want to call it neuroticism, but like that like perfectionism type of mentality where it's like you want to be able to produce at like the highest quality constantly. You're critiquing yourself, and then you see people on Slack, and then you're like, I have to be like, if anyone else is online, I should be online, right?
That's exactly it. Like you see Slack and you're like, wow, people are like interacting and asking questions and everyone's online and it seems like everybody's heads down, but realistically, everybody is probably feeling just as burnt out as you are, just barely making it through the day. And without that communication, without someone saying like, hey, I'm actually really tired, it gives you the impression like you're not doing enough. And that's just not healthy, right? Because we're in a situation where doing enough might be just waking up for the moment, like waking up for the day. Like a lot of people have anxiety and depression, and it's sometimes just hard being present, you know? So when are we going to start talking about like when we don't feel present or when we don't feel able to contribute in the same capacity that maybe we contributed a month ago or a day ago? Like we have to be okay to talk about those kind of things, or else we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting our community.
And the crazy thing is, or the ironic thing is that if you were to have that same kind of, you know, people experience that in the office, but because you would be going to the office, you'd be meeting with your friends, you would be like contrasting with them. People would notice, people would pick up on that, and you'd probably be okay, assuming you have empathetic coworkers, which I know you do. And so I feel like that sort of thing, it just like amplifies it because you're not getting that like feedback from other people that it's like it's okay, and the recognition, and it's harder for them to notice it. And then also I'm sure like, you know, what, you know, like we had some experiences when I was working at the same at the same company. You know, we were on a project that not everyone was happy with, and it was like kind of ratify, or like it almost made it more engaging to work because everyone would be like, yeah, like this sucks. And we'd just like all rally together. We'd be like, why the hell do we have to stay late on a Friday? Screw it. We're going to finish it all before the end of the day, you know?
Yeah. It's that camaraderism. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah.
The kinship of it all. Like you just stick together and you kind of huddle together in the worst of times.
Yeah.
But when you're at home by yourself and you're facing the same computer every day, it's like, wow, you feel so alone and so empty. So in situations like this, it's so important for people to stay communicating in whatever way they can, because you don't get that kind of interaction. You don't get to see people's faces or, you know, try to read the room the same way. Like you can't read a Zoom room, you know, you don't know the vibe.
Totally.
So it's definitely harder.
And you know, the other thing that I hate about Zoom is like, if one person is talking, like that's the person that's talking. There's no like side conversations, right? Whereas like, and it makes sense in a meeting. It's actually kind of like nice for that because it's like, oh, the presenter is presenting. Like, let's all be very organized. But when you're trying to do like a social, it is the weirdest experience because it's like, if you were to do that, like at work when we had a social, you know, we'd all like group around and some people would wander off into a corner and play video games, and some of us would play ping pong, and some of us would be talking at the kitchen table. And a Zoom social is kind of the equivalent of doing that, but everyone's around the table and one person is just shouting into the room.
No, that's exactly what it is. Like you actually just reminded me of the Japanese class that I was taking this year, actually.
Yeah.
I took level 1 last year, and it was in person, and it was such a fantastic experience. Like, I met so much amazing people and made new friends. And then this year I was just like, okay, maybe online learning wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah.
And second class in, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is the most depressing class I've ever been in, because when one person is talking, you can hear all of like their mistakes, and when you're talking, you're conscious of it because you know everybody can hear your mistakes.
Yeah.
And you're just super nervous, and you're talking to a brick wall. It's not a pleasant experience. It feels so isolating.
Yeah. Okay, I'm curious. Like, how have you found learning Japanese? Like, I still don't know any of the French that we learned in high school, you know?
Me neither.
Like, so
I remember how to count. Like, to be honest, it never stuck with me.
yeah. So how did you find learning Japanese?
Japanese was so much easier than French.
Okay.
Like, I am thoroughly enjoying it. It does have its moments where it's like, okay, this is really kind of confusing, especially since when you're translating English over to Japanese, it doesn't work out. Like, English is a very strange language in itself. So trying to convert it over to anything that's more structured than English, it doesn't work out. But comparing French to Japanese, yeah, Japanese is 100% easier. I like the language, and I engage in the language a lot more than I do with like French. You know, I watch anime, I listen to, Japanese music. So I'm constantly hearing certain words or certain phrases that kind of help me pick up on the language quicker.
I was going to ask, actually, like, when you listen to anime now, like, are you able to like pick up on it? Like, if I was listening to like Naruto or something, which is, I mean, whatever, it's a kiddish, whatever. It's a good series.
It's a thing.
Yeah. But like, they would say baka or whatever, and I'd like, oh yeah, I recognize that. Do you find that you can like kind of like follow the conversations a bit?
Absolutely. I definitely can. Some animes I can watch without subtitles entirely.
Yeah.
Because I could just keep following along. But yeah, I've definitely reached that point. And it's a combination of learning the language in like a classroom setting and just constantly engaging in the language throughout daily life.
Totally.
You know, you eventually pick up on phrases and words and, sentence structures and how you're supposed to say certain things, like going through their alphabet. Yeah. Like you definitely do. But it's definitely not because of just the classroom.
Totally, yeah. But and then so to kind of like tie that back into programming randomly, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like I'm assuming. So how did you find, for me, university? I learned certain things in school, but I learned most of what I know now and that what I do now on like my co-op roles and stuff like that, where I was actually working or going to like a hackathon. So I'm curious if you found that kind of like same dissonance there, where it's like, you go to class and you learn things, or did you find like the school super applicable? And then,
so for me, I found it the same way as you did. Like, there was a dissonance when I moved from academia to industry. Like, I could not figure out why I was in school for 6 years and what did I actually learn that I could apply in industry. I felt so confused. Like, as much as I learned very interesting things in university, it was very theoretical. And I think that attributes to the kind of school that I went to. Like, University of Toronto is a very research intensive school. So they're going to try to, condition the students to think very theoretically. But in industry, everything's very practical. You learn a tool, you learn a language, you apply it in a certain way. Even if you do work with algorithms, it's not to the same intensity as what's introduced in university. Yeah. So on some hand, it's like, it's very informative. Like, all the knowledge that I have helps me make better decisions in industry. But in terms of like the practical hands-on skills that I wanted to know before going into industry, university didn't really give me that. I had to learn all of that, out here on the field and just trying out things on my own.
So I'm interested. So when you learned Japanese, did you find that the stuff that you learned in class, so the way I think about it is like programming, it's like you said, like it gave you some like tools to start. And so you've got like a foundation that you can build on, you can make decisions on, but it's almost like you don't even realize you're doing it because it's like ingrained. So you don't know where it's not apparent. It's not easy to like even explain like why this random piece of knowledge you learned one time impacts your decision today, but it does probably, right? Did you find that, do you find that Japanese is the same?
Oh, okay. You know what? Yeah, in some way it is, because when I was in class, they taught us very formal Japanese. So something that you could use in a professional setting. But the Japanese that I kind of want to learn is more informal, like talking to friends, because I have friends that speak Japanese as well. So when I'm trying to communicate to them, I'm following a very strict guideline that's meant for more formal settings, whereas they're more loose about it. And I kind of envy them because I'm just like, I want to speak like that. Like, I want to engage in conversation like that, where when I crack a joke, it's actually funny. It's not just structurally, grammatically correct, And that's kind of the fun of language, even with English. Like, for English, when we're communicating with friends and family and we're cracking jokes, it's very informal, it's very casual. But I couldn't meet them where they were, because I was still learning the language. So it was helpful, yes, if I'm going to apply to a job in Japan, but is it helpful for like engaging in fun conversations with friends? It's a start. Like, it's a beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like I don't know. I was laughing at myself as I was trying to close that loop.
No, that was a good one. That was a good way to close the loop. This is pretty smart. I was like, where is he going with this? But it worked. It worked.
Oh yeah. That's great. So back to the talk. Okay. You finished the talk. How did it go? How did you find it? How do you feel now?
Oh man. So the talk itself did not go so great. Like, I was so prepared, but there were a lot of technical difficulties. Like people couldn't see my slides. Half of my talk got cut off because of some Zoom issue. So like the execution from my part, I felt was flawless, but did anybody else see it? Not exactly, not to the way that I wanted them to see it.
Yeah.
So it was a little disappointing, but at the same time, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my potential, and I learned a lot about what people find valuable, because right at the beginning, when I was like introducing myself and, talking about Elasticsearch, my friend was telling me like a lot of people were really like astounded with like your experience and why you started writing. And I realized like, wow, people really care. Like people really want this content. People really want to know more, and they care about my perspective, even though I'm only 4 years into this industry. My voice still matters. So it was very insightful. Now I feel like, man, I really want to do that again. I want to keep doing these kind of talks and using my voice on a bigger platform.
Totally.
But it's the road to get there. It's always like, how do I get there?
Random thing I found was this site. I'll send it a link to you after, but it's CFP Land. And it's this guy who just has like an email list, and they just send you conferences each week that are coming up. And a lot of them are virtual now. So I haven't gotten one, but I also haven't applied to many because I don't have anything really to talk about. I'm more of the like listen-y type. But what was I going with that? Oh yeah. So that's that. I'll send you a link after. I think you should do that. But I was also going to ask, would you put that on YouTube?
You know what? I've been thinking about going between either Twitch or YouTube. Like, I really do want to start like developing. Sorry, my dad's like coughing in the background.
No worries.
I really do want to start like sharing content, like video content.
Yeah.
But if writing content is already this difficult, I cannot imagine what it's like to develop video content and have to edit that and, go through that whole process of like, how do I make it aesthetically pleasing? And does this make sense? And how many times do I have to re-record this before I get it right? So that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about going the Twitch route because it's live. People could pop in. I could explain things. It's a little bit more casual.
Yeah.
But it's getting the audience, you know, getting my voice out there and feeling comfortable talking to a wall for a couple of months while I build my audience. So
yeah, I like that. I feel like you could do, I can't even imagine doing Twitch. Like it sounds so stressful. Like it's live. I like to like edit everything I say after the fact.
Yeah, yeah, I thought about it too, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist at heart.
Yeah.
So when I was preparing for those presentations, I practiced for almost 2 weeks straight. Like I just kept rehearsing my speaker's notes. And every time like I stumbled over a word, I'm like, oh, God damn it. Like,
yeah.
People are going to think I'm so dumb. And the reality is nobody's thinking that, you know, people are just there to learn something from you. They don't care if, you know, you stumble over a word or two. So you have to just find the confidence to believe like people aren't going to judge you for, you know, the small little mistakes that you think are so big.
Yeah.
You know, they're there to learn something from you. They're there to, you know, engage with you. So just be yourself and engage back.
I agree 100%. And I think like my takeaway from that is you should just record your rehearsal and post it. And I would totally watch. But
really?
that I have a video that has like 500 views, which is a lot for me. And it's like me and my friends in university recorded this like cryptocurrency Bitcoin talk. And it was just a bunch of random slides that we threw together, right? And none of us knew what we were talking about. Like I had bought some Bitcoin and I thought I knew everything. And my friends had literally never even heard of Bitcoin prior to starting the project. And so it's just an hour of us like talking out our asses. And the fact that it's just slides and people talking, it, you know, keeps doing pretty well.
So 500, that's a lot. Like that's a lot.
It's right. Like it's been up there for like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years at least, but still like it, you know, built up over time.
Yeah. It's the fact that people are finding it.
Yeah.
And actually watching it.
Yeah. And I think if you do anything, like if you did that content, like, you know, of course, like the first 50 videos that you make are going to be like crap or whatever, but you know, like people won't care. Like you'll probably get a lot of views and like based on your like, you know, you've already got like a super successful Medium post about the same topic, guaranteed those same people would like look at the YouTube video and be like, this is awesome. And you know what? Then you can cross post, put the YouTube video in the Medium post, but the Medium.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking. Now we onto something. Well, that's so true. Like when it comes to content creation, it's mostly about consistency.
Yeah.
You know, if you have people that are gravitating towards what you're writing or what you're saying, you know, it doesn't matter if you think it's imperfect, just keep pumping out content because eventually you'll get it. You'll evolve and you'll start to get things right. It's all a learning, you know, curve. And
totally. When
I first started writing, I had no idea what I was doing. Like my first article was about, you know, growing up a Black woman, a Black girl, right? Like, and I only wrote that because I was so frustrated about what was going on. Well, this was prior to Black Lives Matter, but I was so frustrated with what was going on in my life and how people viewed me. And it was 3 a.m. in the morning and I just typed together some stuff and I pushed it and I was just like, well, if one person reads it, I'm happy. And then the next morning it was like 100 people read it. I was just like, well, I was not expecting that. Yeah. But people gravitated to that. People wanted to know my perspective. And that's all it's really about. If you have something to say, then just say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, like it's kind of surprising to hear that was like the first article that you wrote. I thought it was, and that you wrote it like overnight because I remember reading that article and it was like extremely well written. And it's like really, I don't know the word, like emphatic. I don't know. Like that's not really what I'm saying. Like it was like a powerful article. Like I thought it was really well written too, but I was impressed by that. I figured that was like a magnum opus type of thing.
No, that was a 3 a.m. I'm fed up of life kind of thing.
Wow.
That was that. So it was shocking to me. And eventually I was just like, you know what, maybe I'll just keep writing. Maybe I'm catching on to something here. And that's really all you need. You just have to start something and be consistent with it, and don't give up just because, you get, 5 views today and maybe 2 tomorrow. Eventually, it'll build up over time.
Yeah.
And that's what really matters.
Totally. I love that. I think that's a good that's a good message for the summary of this.
Yeah, no, it actually is. The summary, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Just do it. Sorry, I know this is a little bit like random all over the place. It's kind of
no, it's a great conversation. Like
it's funny because like we're having a conversation and then I'm also trying to like plan out what we're going to talk about as we're saying it. So it's kind of like it's like a weird
No, like I'm kind of curious, like how do you manage to do these podcasts? Like you have to be such a quick thinker to come up with great questions to follow up with,
I think that the key is I just let you talk as long as I can. And I try to stop myself from interrupting because that's like a really bad habit of mine.
Yeah.
Which I think is just, every dude in tech has that same damn problem.
But it doesn't help that we're on Zoom as well. So you can't really tell.
Yeah. And then, sometimes I'll do video, sometimes I won't, but it's a little weird doing that. The voice calls are kind of nice, actually. Like it's more just chill,
I'm kind of curious, like what's your process? Like, how do you manage to like come up with these questions on the spot? Are you taking notes?
Not right now, but I kind of so I invited you on like, I think like at least a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, right? So I have like a process of like, I do this bullet journaling thing where I just like journal out everything that I do throughout the day. And so I have like a task list and there's one task for each guest that I want to invite. And then one task for like brainstorm topics. And then then I make like a little collection or like a page for the actual conversation, which I forgot to do this time, but whatever. I'll just listen over to it. And so then like, I think like 2-3 weeks ago, I kind of like wrote out like things I really wanted to know, which like I kind of told you at the very beginning, which is just kind of like, like how did you get the talk opportunity, but like also, like what drove you to write that first article, which is, and then also like the burnout article and like, so like little things that like I want to point out, but other than that, it's kind of just like whatever you're interested in talking about, I'll just try and keep going with it.
You just follow along. No, that's really great. And like, that's a wonderful thing about content creation. It's about being creative about it, like what can you do in the moment to really give something people are willing to watch or listen to or read. Yeah. So no, kudos to you. Like this was awesome.
Yeah. And then, and the benefit of this is really like, this is just me trying to not be crazy and like, stay at home and not talk to anyone. So
no,
it's like such a cool like way to like just it's like a chit chat, right? And then like if it ends up being like a great episode, that's totally it's a bonus. Like actually like last week I got to meet like a hero of mine from Twitter, Charity Majors, and it was like it's just so cool, and she's like a really badass, like really kind woman, and she's just like so smart, and I was just like, I can't believe I'm even talking to this person, and she said we're friends now, and I was like, I feel like this is cool.
your hero is now your friend. See, that's the beauty of it, like when you start to write content, you get to interact with people you never thought you'd ever interact with. When the Elasticsearch, okay, so funny story. The day after I posted my Elasticsearch article, and I realized how popular it was, I got a message on Twitter, and at first I didn't know it was an Elasticsearch dev, but like he was saying like, I really liked your article, like this, that, and the third, and he said something in particular that gave me the idea that he was an Elasticsearch dev. I can't remember exactly what he said, but like I looked at it and I was just like, wait a minute. Hold on, that name looks familiar. And then I went on the Elasticsearch blog and searched him up, and I realized he was a dev and almost had a heart attack in my room. I'm like, oh my God, he's complimenting me. And so I freaked out because I never in a million years would have thought anybody of importance would read my articles ever. So to have someone from like the company that I'm writing about reach out to me and be like, this was really good, is the biggest compliment I could have ever gotten. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so honored to meet you. Like, I'm treating them like they're the queen or something, but that's how it feels like. You can't believe for your own eyes, like someone would talk to you and in their state, like in
and
their
you know
capacity.
what's really cool is like what it teaches you is like, you know, like the fact that that person reached out to you, like, you know, that they could look up to you, right? Like they like your article. They think like, oh, this is like a really insightful thing, right? It's like, there's no difference really. It's just that they are in a different location or stage or, you know, different tale, but like,
it's the same thing, you know, like, I bet there are people out there that look up to you and you don't think you're doing anything special, but to them, it's just like, wow, like Matt's doing such amazing things. And like, they talk to you and they're freaking out, but you're like, wait, hold on, but I'm not doing anything that special though. But it's just that kind of thing. Like everybody looks up to somebody, you know, everybody wants to be at some place or some point in their life that, you know, matches their idol. So when you get to meet that idol and express how much they've impacted your life, it's like one of the most amazing moments of your life.
Totally. That's so cool. I love that. Is there anything else you want to like chat about, or are you good with?
I'm pretty sure that's it. Like, other than I just submitted my pre-recording for the Elasticsearch conference. I think this is their first conference. So it will be next week on the 27th. I think I'm doing 2 sessions, 26th and the 27th. So yeah, if people want to tune on into that would be awesome.
I'll try and release this before. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's on the weekend. Sweet. All right. It'll be up.
Yeah. You have enough time, but thank you so much for having me, Matt. Like, this was an amazing opportunity.
Thanks for coming on. This was so fun. It's cool to chat. Hopefully we can like catch up one day.
Absolutely. After all of this is over, everybody needs to reunite and do like karaoke and drink and have a little fun.
Yes. I don't drink anymore, but down for karaoke. That was like the best social ever, I think.
You know what? It's interesting because over the quarantine, I've changed like my like eating habits and stuff like that. Because like my health hasn't been the best for the past like 2 years. So it's just like, well, if I'm at home all the time, I might as well try to dedicate myself to eating healthier so I can improve my health.
Yeah.
And it's been working out. Like I cut out alcohol. I only have alcohol like on special occasions like Christmas or my birthday. But alcohol does so much damage to your body. You don't really understand until you stop drinking it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So good on you for like cutting it out. Like it's not worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Like I think it for me, it was like a big crutch for the anxiety and stuff. So I have had so much more anxiety since I stopped drinking, which is kind of funny, but I think I've just gotten used to it instead of like trying to like blunt it and like do whatever. It's just kind of like, I'm always anxious. I'll just harness the energy, I guess.
Yeah, you gotta like redirect your anxious energy into other places.
Yeah.
But I'm also quite the anxious person, and there's no good way of dealing with anxiety. Like you have to find your own way at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
But good on you. Good on you.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear that like, I mean, like I really want to like see more like your content. I'm so excited. Like every time I see you post, I'm just like, this is awesome. Like I want for more of us to like feel like we can share our thoughts, because I feel like there's not that big of a difference between like American tech and Canadian tech or whatever, right? Like I think we have like a lot of imposter syndrome here just because we're not part of like the, you know, the biggest deal or whatever.
Silicon Valley vibe. Yeah, we're not part of that. So we feel like, oh, let's just keep quiet in our little corner. But realistically, we have great potential here.
Yeah. And I mean, like you went to U of T. Like U of T is like one of the top schools in the world for AI. Actually, I think it might be the top. Like
you know what? Yeah, I think so. Maybe Waterloo. I'm not too sure. But Waterloo was like our competitor for computer science. So there's a lot of potential in the city, and I wish more people would take the time to like recognize that, you know, like you don't have to walk away from Toronto to find good opportunities. There's great opportunities here.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for doing this. This was
Thank
fun.
you. About the sirens, that is the consequence of living in the city.
It's kind of nice. I was even thinking about it. I'm like, that's a cool way to close it out. You know, it's just like, all right, Landy's got to go take care of some shit.
I got to walk away from the computer real quick. They're coming after me.
Anyhow.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is fun. I'll see you around.
See you. Bye.
Bye.